House Bill 211 by Representative Wright, Title 17, Public School Choice, School Funding, Applicability of School and District Accountability Appeals Process.
Representative Wright on your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, HB211 is a newer version of a bill we did in the special session in October that passed the House. HB42 essentially allows, it puts some structure around the 2014 law that allows students from a D or F school to go to an A, B, or C school. We put in some dates in which the schools are to define capacity. We put in a window at the request of the Superintendent of Education, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, for a question on the bill, Representative Mincy.
Representative Wright. So last year you authored HB 42, which have allowed Bessie to grant waivers for inter-district transfers. And this year you've offered HB 211. What is the purpose of 211? What does it actually do?
211 gives students the opportunity to have Bessie review decisions made by school boards under the 2014 law.
So again, we're back to Bessie making those decisions, waivers.
That's not true. Bessie's not making those decisions. The school board makes it based on the capacity that they define. We set the dates for them to define, and only if the student has a problem with the decision can Bessie review it.
Do you? I know the target for this. We talked about this a pretty good bit today. The target is our D and F students. Do you know how many students we have in the state that are in D and Fs?
122,000 at least.
122,000. And what categories is that? Is that all schools?
That's throughout the state of Louisiana and D or F schools.
So the last numbers I have are from 2019. I think it's the and in public schools, which I would call public schools, it would be traditional public schools, and it's also your Type 1 and Type 3 charters. 17.56% of that population is in D and F school. So 17.56% of the population in public schools are in a D or F students. Do you know what that population would be for our charter schools?
No.
Would you be surprised that 41.56% of the Type 2 charter school population are in D and F schools?
I'm not surprised. I mean, I don't know why that applies here.
I'm getting there.
Yeah, I'm sure you are.
Do you know how many students in our recovery districts are in D and F schools?
I don't.
Again, would you be surprised to know that 89.29% of our students in our recovery districts are in D and F schools?
It's quite possible.
Does your bill address just public schools, or does this address everybody?
This is public schools.
So we got a population of 17% that's D and Fs, and we're addressing that with a bill. But the other populations, which are much larger, doubled, tripled, 4 times as long, we're not doing anything with that. Is that accurate?
We're addressing public schools right now. That's all we're dealing with.
Can you tell me why Bessie was considered to do these waivers?
Why Bessie? Because we didn't want to force these students to have to go to court to challenge a decision. We have decent anecdotal evidence that some people were being declined, perhaps unnecessarily so. So this was what was proposed. And by the way, Bessie supports this.
Yeah, so last year I sponsored HB 59, which was a school liability that allowed our schools to have some liability protection when we went to school during COVID-19. Do you know that Bessie opposed that bill last year? Bessie opposed.
I don't know. I mean, it's possible. Are we supposed to ask questions? Or,
yeah, this is a question.
Okay.
So my question is, Bessie opposed writing the guidelines so our kids can go to school, and now we're expecting them to write, grant waivers in parish. Is that accurate?
I don't know about waivers. That's not waivers. This is they can review decisions.
Okay.
They're elected officials. They deal with education in the state of Louisiana. This makes sense.
So you think Bessie is in favor of this, correct?
Bessie testified in committee where there was no objections that they supported this.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So I would say that this is an intra-district transfer, school choice that Bessie supported. Earlier today, we had an inter-district school choice that I sponsored, and they opposed it. So I'm just the inconsistencies.
I think they opposed it because there was questions about what you were implementing. So I don't think it's fair to compare the bills.
Well, I think they're both on school choice. And
Well, you could call it school choice, but that's not the definitions in it.
well, the title of your bill is school choice, so that's why.
That's fine. I mean, I think we're comparing apples or oranges, honestly. We actually took the intra out because, if I recall correctly, you and a whole bunch of others that you work with had a problem and were mischaracterizing as if a ton of people were going to be crossing district lines and stuff. And to be honest, that wasn't true. It never was going to be the case. And your numbers just actually demonstrated some of that.
So I had a little different recollection. I wasn't a part of those discussions, but I understood in the committee that you had referenced, because I watched it, you had referenced that it never was intended to be in there, the inter-district. Is that accurate?
What? Tell me again.
I was under the impression that you never intended the inter-district language to be in 211.
That's right. No, we took it out this time because it caused so much controversy.
So was it taken out because it never was intended to be in there, or because me and others that I didn't do was opposed to it?
No, it was so easy to mischaracterize. That's why we did it. Well, the first time we brought the bill, HB211, in October, we simply set up definitions because it's according to the law, you can do it. The law that never passed in 2014 is specifically talked about between districts. So we tried to set up an infrastructure to accommodate that. It wasn't with the intention of seeing, as the social media posts went, hordes of kids coming from Washington to St. Tammany Parish. That wasn't going to happen.
So my question would be, another question would, in committee today, we talked about Bessie representative actually brought up the word creaming. He said that they were opposed to my inter-district transfer because they was concerned about creaming. Now, I assumed what they mean was the cream would rise to the top, and your higher performing students would go to a better school.
I'm not going to speculate on what they mean.
Members,
That's another bill.
Representative Wright, look, I want to get back to the question and answer format. Question, answer. If you want to go to the floor and make an argument, that's what the floor button is for. Go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker.
So are you telling me I need to go to, instead of, I thought I was asking questions.
I'm just trying to make everybody mindful it's a question and answer, not an argument.
Yeah, I'm not making an argument, Mr. Speaker
ask
Pro
your
Tem.
question.
I'm just trying to make a point.
Okay.
Well, that's not a question.
What's that?
I think you're supposed to make a point down at the well, as I understand it. That's
Well,
not,
my question was, do you think that this bill is going to allow students, your higher performing students, to leave a D and F and go to an A, B, or C school? Would it be reasonable to
only
expect?
as defined by the capacity limits of the school. This bill, should it become law, is inherently limited by the capacities of the schools, as the school systems as they define it. So the schools essentially say, this is our capacity. So if the school system says that's it, that's what it is.
Yeah, so I guess my point, or my question is, if we got students who are leaving that, it would be the same concern that Bessie had earlier today, that your higher performing students will be leaving.
I disagree. I don't know. I'm not going to speak for Bessie.
Yes, sir. So did you know I was a school board member?
Oh, yeah.
All right. So I was a school board member for 13 years, and do you know how many transfers, intra-district transfers, I approved?
I think it was 0. You told me that last week.
Yes, sir. It was
That's right.
0. Do you remember what that process was that we went through?
No, I don't remember. Sorry.
So the process, as a school system, transfer requests, if they come to a school board member, we refer them to our superintendent, and they go through the process. The assistant superintendent reviews it. School board members do not make decisions. At least we don't. We don't make decisions on transfers. But now we're going to allow Bessie to override our superintendent's positions and allow a transfer.
Only override if they don't act according to the manual. And the definition that they set for capacity within the manual. So they basically making decisions based on their own criteria.
Are you familiar with Act 1 that came about during the General Administration?
Somewhat, but not enough to speak to it here.
So Act 1 during the General Administration, when there was the last big educational reform, this is whenever they took powers away from school board members, school boards, and gave them to the superintendent. And so our superintendent are empowered to make decisions that are best for our school systems. And now we're taking that power away and actually allowing another entity, a Bessie entity that's not involved in those school systems.
We're not taking it away.
Are they going to be allowed to grant waivers or override the decision of a school system?
Only if they do not act according to the manual that they set, or the capacity that they set in the manual. That's
on page 2, lines 10 and 12. You talk about it, students being removed the state accountability for 2 years if they transfer. It's my understanding that the federal law and the state's ESSA plan does not allow accountability to be waived for 2 years in that capacity. Do you think 211 violates federal law?
no, not in my understanding.
So if there's no students that can be waived from that accountability, but your bill allows them to be waived from that accountability for 2 years, you don't think that's a conflict?
No.
Okay. And lastly, Superintendent Falk came and spoke about transfer requests in committee, and he gave a pretty good account. By his count, there was 1,953 students who had asked for a transfer, an inter-transfer.
Well, if you recall, in committee, some numbers were thrown out. I picked out an example where the parish didn't have DNF schools, and it's like, how can we cite them because they don't apply here? So, to me, listen, I respect Mr. Falk in the work he does, but at the end of the day, when you come and you just throw out some stats at committee, and I see a problem with, immediately can pick out one and say, is that right? I think give us something on paper, let's see it. So I'm not going to sit here and argue over what was given to us there.
So in committee, he reported that 1,953, they had 1,953 documented accounts of inter-transfer requests. And of those, only 123 had been denied, and 111 of them were denied because of capacity.
Representative Vincey, if my child or anybody here's child was one of those 111 or the 9 or whatever we're citing, I would be ticked off if they weren't treated fairly, okay? And that's what this is here to do. For the poor families that can't get out of a district with a DRF school and they just want to give their kid a chance. If this helps one kid, it matters.
And I appreciate that passionate plea there. I know your heart is in the right direction. But you see, the problem is school systems are obligated.
Is this a question, Mr. Acting Speaker?
I was going to say, get to the question, Representative.
You want me to come to the floor?
I think you should come
Yes.
to the
I'll
floor
be
if you
glad
got
to.
points to make. Thank you.
Representative Marcel with a question. In questions and answers, we're going to do this the right way.
Oh, you gonna start on me, right?
I
Did you know?
started Representative Mincy, but I will continue on
He
you,
just didn't
Representative
listen
Marcel.
to you. I'm gonna follow what you're asking me to do,
Thank
Mayor
you.
Pro Tem. Representative Wright, is it your intentions to take away the local control from the schools?
Not in my opinion.
I'm sorry, can you pull the mic up? I can't
Not
hear
in my opinion, no.
Did you know that I believe that 211 takes the local controls from the school districts? If we're going to go down the path of allowing Bessie to make these decisions, did you know that that's taking away control from the local districts?
I disagree.
You disagree. Why do you disagree?
Because the districts have the ability to control from the start, whether it be defining capacity, putting in the manual, and making the decision truly about capacity, then it's
So
easy.
if they have control now, help me to understand, tell me why is your bill needed to make school choice?
We have examples where people have been denied and it hasn't been according to capacity. That's why we're doing the bill.
So is it your testimony that when the school districts makes a decision regarding a student transfer, then what your bill is allowing to happen is for Bessie to come back and overrule that decision? Is that what we're doing with your bill?
If it wasn't made correctly according to the law, so in other words, they're going to put capacity definition in the manual. If the school district makes the decision according to the capacity definition in the manual, then there's nothing for Bessie to do.
Okay. Along those lines, are you familiar with the accountability plans that the school districts have already entered into? Are you familiar with those?
What,
The accountability plans?
the desegregation plans?
No, not the desegregation plans. The accountability plans that the school districts already have in place. Are you familiar with those?
I'm not familiar with that term.
You're not? Okay. What about 211 violating the federal law as it relates to transferring students midstream? Are you familiar with that?
No, we disagree. We don't think it does.
You disagree?
Yeah.
So you disagree that they're currently not allowed to be transferred during a certain period. Federal law.
Okay.
You disagree with that?
I mean, we've been through 4 committee hearings on this, and no one's brought this to my attention. So,
Or no one brought it to your attention?
yeah, nobody said this is a problem.
Okay. Well, did you know
Right.
that I'm telling you that it is a problem and it is a violation?
I respect that.
Did you know, I want parents to have some options and some choices. Did you know that I don't believe that what your bill does helps this process because of certain laws that are already in place federally? Did you know that your bill 211 would violate federal law in terms of transfers? And I don't want to pick certain children to assist and leave others behind. Did you know?
I didn't know.
You didn't. I just think that there needs to be some more conversation on how do we get here. As your bill is written, perhaps you can look at the federal law as it relates to the transfers and look it up for yourself, but I think it violates federal law, and so I can't support it as it is written. I understand your intent and what you're trying to do. I just don't believe that this bill gets us there. Did you know?
I now know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Chuck Owens with a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Representative Wright, let me make sure I've got this straight. If a child is in a D or if a student is in a D or an F school, and there is space for that child within the district, that child may move, that student may move, correct?
That's correct. Since 2014.
Okay. So if there is space and the child is not permitted to move, that's when the family is authorized to try to adjudicate this, so to speak, or try to get a referee decision on this from the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, correct?
That's correct.
That's the 40,000 foot level that I got in the committee. Is that still the intent of this?
That's right.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Bagley with a question. Representative James, why do you rise?
To the 5-minute rule, please. 3 minutes. Thank you.
The 3-minute rule. Members, if we enact a 3-minute rule, you have 3 minutes for presentation, 3 minutes for questions, and 3 minutes for closing. Is there an objection to adopting the 3-minute rule? With 10 minutes and questions for total. Is there an objection to adopting the 3-minute rule?
No objection here.
Seeing no objection, it's adopted. Representative Bagley with a question.
Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, Representative, this bill involves Bessie in making rules about things that are occurring in a parish, correct?
Not making rules.
Well, well, explain that to me then.
No, they can review the decision that was made from the school system about capacity, which should be defined. There's a window of opportunity to apply for it. So I don't see them making rules, no.
No, I misspoke. That wasn't what I meant to say.
Okay.
But I appreciate you straightening me up. I'll say this, and I'm not going to go over a lot of the others because I know we're tight on time. My school board called me and said, never vote on that. Try to get all your people to vote against it. We don't want them in our business. So I'm going to say that, and I'm going to sit down. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Cormier with a question.
Representative, curious question. Do they differentiate between kids trying to escape just a really bad school when they make these decisions at the local level, and then kids who specifically want to go say, like, oh, I want to go to Ben Franklin because it's Ben Franklin, as opposed to one of the other, that's my first question, one of the other magnet schools?
That's a good question. I'd be hesitant to try to answer that. It's basically if you're in a D or F school, right? Since 2014, the law says you can move to an A, B, or C school if there's capacity. Okay. And so this is basically putting some kind of structure on that. How it happens, that probably would be defined, part of the definition of capacity in the manual.
Okay, and the other question is, in case of something, if I really thought I was done wrong, couldn't I just go to district court and sue the school board? If that,
That's why we set this up. We just didn't think it was smart
to avoid it,
to go to court over this, right? And so we have a state board. They're elected, so they're accountable. It makes sense for them to review this decision. It's a basic check and balance, and I just don't understand why there's such resistance to that. We have a lot of checks and balances in this building, all over the place.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Representative Mack for a question.
Representative Wright, no, I will tell you I respect you for keeping you cool down there. You're doing a great job.
All right.
One, I know a lot of members get calls from the school board members and maybe coaches saying this is more about athletics and education. This is strictly about education.
That's exactly right. This is about D or F schools to A through B, A, B, and C schools.
Okay. And if Bessie were to make a decision one way or the other, this doesn't limit someone's ability or their option to go to court or do whatever they would need to do past that, would it?
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Bessie makes their decision or local school makes their decision one way or the other. That doesn't limit them. They still have the option to maybe go to court and have it reviewed. Is that right?
Well, certainly after Bessie makes a decision, you could go to court if you felt it was
right.
worthwhile. The whole point was to avoid that.
The point's to avoid it, but you're not limiting it either.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Okay. All right. Good job.
Mr. Speaker, we're going to return to the calendar. Thank you.
All right.